On how to make the money work, and the panel is going to be our our moderator is going to be Liz Zavala, a PressClub board member, and who's really volunteered a lot of wonderful of her own documents. But we're going to have each of our three speakers kind of make an initial presentation, and then Liz, actually, you're going to make a small presentation as well. And then we'll lead to whatever questions and answers you guys have about actually making the money work, making a living out of this freelance business. So, and I guess what I'll do is just introduce them individually, and then come up, and then we'll open it up for questions. But the first person that I'm going to introduce, it's exciting for us because she's a graduate of our program from last year, as a matter of fact, May 2012. Natalie Blankenship. Natalie is, I had the pleasure of having her in my digital journalism class, and she started coming to network at events like this. She was networking last year at this very event, and Social Media Club of Dallas. And she has since started her own freelance social media agency called New Digital Strategies. I'll call up the link here in just a second, but she had to figure out how to make the money work almost immediately while she was in school, even researching how to price her services. She found shared office space with one of our speakers from our workshop here a year ago. So she's had to be very practical and methodical in going about how to start her own business and how to make the money work, how to make a living at it. So without further ado, Natalie Blankenship.
Thanks, Jake, for having me speak here. I'm Natalie Blankenship, and like you said, I started a social media agency called New Digital Strategies last March, so it's almost been a whole year now. Before I get started, I have to say, thanks to Jake, I started doing the Social Media Club. I know he's mentioned it a bunch of times, but if anyone's interested in learning more about digital strategy and how you can improve your business through social media, it's an awesome club to go to, and just they have great speakers and lots of networking opportunities. So that's pretty much where I met all my connections. So to start out, I just want to talk to you guys about how I made the money work by starting a business about something I'm passionate about, so social media. Basically, I just jumped right into it. I knew I wanted to start a business. I come from a really entrepreneurial family, so I knew I wanted to start a business from the get-go. So basically, I made connections with from my food blog, thatfoodiegirl.com, and my first client was Stephen Piles. You may have heard of him. He's a celebrity chef here in Dallas. So actually, I met him through, I did a review on one of his restaurants, and I just met him that way. He greeted me the second time I came, and we started a relationship, and he became my first client. So that kind of gave me the motivation and confidence to start pitching other people, so that was kind of a big client to start with. So as Jake said, I do share an office space, so that was a huge thing for me, getting out of my apartment and working with other people. So I work out of BuzzShift, which is a content marketing, search engine optimization, and social media firm here in Dallas. So I met Cameron Gawley, Jake also mentioned him. He was a speaker last year. I met him at Social Media Club, and he just kind of gave me some advice. It was his third startup, so he's kind of done the whole startup thing. And we had lunch together, and he offered me some advice, and then he eventually just offered up office space. So I just kind of sit in there, and it's really cool to bounce ideas off of each other, and just having other people in the industry who've done it longer and who are a little more knowledgeable has been awesome for me. And I've done a little copywriting for them on the side, so that was kind of cool when I needed more work, which is a totally different story now. But so also now I want to talk to you guys about turning pitches into clients, which is huge. All of this has been a big learning experience, but before I started pitching clients, I have a document where I wrote up facts about social media, how it can help a business, and then I kind of did what I do and kind of simplified it, because digital marketing, digital strategy, it can sound really confusing, but it can be simply described in an email. So, and then I would tell them where I could improve things for their business. So the huge thing here was just doing my research on the companies I wanted to pitch, and then making phone calls, following up, and even knocking on doors. I had to do that. I picked a day of the week, and every Tuesday I would go, literally, walk into businesses and introduce myself. Hi, I'm Natalie. This is what I do, and here's my card, and I'd love to help you out. And just for them to see my face and actually talk to them was, I mean, one of my highest paying clients is someone I just walked into the door, and I mean, that's all it really takes. So obviously I did my research, so I knew what I was talking about, and I knew about their company. So yeah, I guess it's really huge to follow up, even if you feel like you're being annoying or you're being pushy. I mean, it took me 9 months to get one of my clients. I kept emailing her, kept calling her, and it's just, that just kind of shows also that you have the work ethic and you're going to keep going after them. So I never stop looking for new clients. It's really easy to get lost in the work that you already have if you're a freelancer too. It's easy to just get into a routine and stuff, but it's really important to keep looking for people. I'm always, even when I go out to dinner or I'm out shopping and I see a business that seems cool and could use some help, I mean, just see the whole picture. That's kind of what I'm getting at. So also, the cool thing about freelancing or starting your own business is being able to choose your clients. So some clients are more fun to work with and some not so much. So you get to decide who you want to pitch, and you just basically, what I've been going through is creating my identity, building my brand as new digital strategies, and kind of figuring out what types of clients I want. So right now I'm more into the smaller local businesses. Well, not local. I've got some actually international clients also, but I guess I want to move towards bigger brands, and it's just up to you and what you want. And then one of the most important things to make your money work is your pricing. So we had a family friend that started a social media agency. She actually never launched it, but she had her website up and everything, and she was really helpful. Just to get my initial prices, I just took her prices off her website, which is basically I charge per platform per month. So for Facebook, I have a rate like per month, and then Twitter is separate, Instagram, Pinterest, and then I'll do group rates. This worked for me. I did monthly retainers, but I figured out that some clients in some industries take more time and energy. So I took my prices off my website, and I do it per consultation, and I figure out, how much this work is worth, basically. So I determine how much my time is worth, how many hours I spend on each client per day, and then I determined my hourly rate, and then I multiply that by 2, so I start with that number, and then I come down on that if it's absolutely necessary. So in the beginning, money up front is necessary. I mean, it can be kind of awkward, but I would ask for money up front. Just I wouldn't, and also a contract, as we already went over that, but contracts are absolutely crucial. I won't start on any work until I have the contract signed and I have the money, the check in front of me. That's something my dad told me, so I had to listen to that. And don't underprice your services and take on a bunch of clients, because you'll just burn out really fast. Like, even if you really want this client and they're asking you for a discount, it's really not worth your time. And then always keep the number you're comfortable with, your hourly rate, in mind, and just how much time you're going to spend on that client, and don't ever go lower than the number you have in mind, how much time or how much you think you're worth. Another important thing to make the money work is time management. So I balance a bunch of accounts right now. I balance 8 different clients, so each client is about 2 to 3 accounts, so a Twitter and a Facebook. Some have Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest, so it's a lot to balance, but I keep to-do lists and calendars and alerts, Google alerts. Whenever one of my brands is mentioned, I have to address that. Anytime someone comments on the post, I have to respond. Basically being everywhere at once. So staying on top of everything. And you also need to keep in mind how much time you need to spend on each project. So my huge thing is balance. So I don't think working from 9 to 5 is essential. Spending your time effectively, not efficiently, is the key. So making a conscious effort to produce results and really hone in on your higher level tasks. So not necessarily just tackle the harder things first and then go for the smaller tasks. And I'll mention it later, but I highly recommend 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. I'm sure some of you've read it. It's really extreme, but I have taken a few key things away from it, like checking my email at 11 a.m. and 4 p.m. I just kind of batch all of that together and wait to address all the emails 2 times a day. It really, they show a graph in the book how much time people spend on their email every day. Everyone's spending so much time on their email rather than tackling the tasks that are actually important, the things that you're supposed to be delivering to your clients, rather than having a conversation via email back and forth. That's just a waste of time. Also, something I've learned a lot from Budget, from Cameron and Eddie, but keeping your clients versus getting more clients. Like I said, it is important to always look for new clients, but something big is keeping the clients that you have. So once they've signed on, you've gotten a new client, yeah, it's time to celebrate, but you have to prove yourself every single day when you get those clients. So just never get comfortable even with whatever project you've been hired on for. You don't necessarily have it tomorrow, even with contracts, because like I said, contracts are important, but they're not everything. So I basically have been focusing on building my relationships, pleasing the clients I have, and building on the accounts that I have with them. So I have a bridal boutique, Patsy's, where I actually bought my wedding dress. I'm getting married in June. So thank you. My fiance's right here. Anyway, but I have Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest with them, and we're talking about developing a blog because, well, obviously Pinterest is very wedding-centric, so it's very easy to leverage Pinterest for their industry, but we're talking about doing a blog, so it's just looking ahead and seeing what else you can build on with the clients you have. Also, when you lose clients or you lose a project, you just have to keep going. You have to remember that it happens and it's natural to have turnover. That's something I've learned, and I've learned that losing clients for social media industry is kind of like they either don't understand the value of social media, they just don't get Twitter, they don't have the time to deal with it, or they don't have the money to pay for it, whatever it is. You just have to realize that you can't be discouraged and just focus on the stuff that you have and focus on business development. Also, I know we touched on this a little bit, but dealing with clients who don't pay on time and clients who are unresponsive, this has been the hugest part of my job, is dealing with clients who don't email me back or think that I can be their entire marketing department without them. A lot of people don't realize it's going to take some time on their part too, because all these clients I have do not have traditional PR or advertising. I am all 3 departments for them. So you have to be kind of upfront with them about, it's going to take some time, it's going to take, a 30-minute phone conversation every few weeks, but be kind, even if you want to scream in their face. Some people are rude, and you just kind of have to deal with it and be kind to them. Okay, so lastly, I guess if you leave here only learning one thing from me, I guess the most important thing I would say is to follow up. That is really what has gotten me to where I am now, is I'm really big on following up. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone or even just walk right in. And also face-to-face is really what sells you. Even though this is all digital and everything is behind the computer, it's still face-to-face is really vital. So collecting enough clients that will allow you to live off of. So now I've reached that point. I can live off of my clients and my business, but focusing on that and then working on making the big bucks that takes work. And I'm every facet of the business, and it's hard. And I'm actually hiring an intern right now because I have a lot of work and I can't do this by myself. So looking for interns, and hopefully that'll help. But I guess the big thing also is creating a job that will make you happy. Because now, like Jake was talking about, in this day and age, you can really create your own job, and that was my goal. And so far, it's working. But my goal is to buy an office space, hire employees, keep it a boutique agency, but hopefully grow into an award-winning agency. So that's my goal. And then I want to leave you with a quote from Tim Ferriss of 4-Hour Workweek, the book I mentioned earlier. Most people will choose unhappiness over uncertainty. So I chose uncertainty, and sometimes it is uncertain, and sometimes I kind of wish I had just taken a salary job, but in the end, I think I am happier, and I'd say go after it, and sometimes it's a risk, but it's definitely worth it in the end.
Great. Two things particularly warm my heart about what Natalie said. The first thing is, and I forgot to mention it when introducing it, when one of your 2012 graduates circulates an internship posting less than a year to hire her former classmates, you're moving in the right direction, I think. So that was particularly fun. I think just in the past couple of weeks that internship posting has been circulating. But the second thing is just the idea of this is public relations, this is social media, but underscoring the value of shoe leather reporting, following up, picking up the phone, going down there, walking in. Same thing of being a good reporter, right? I mean, and so Natalie's using the journalism skills that she learned and honed in our program to advance her personal business. So these skills are just so translatable. A lot of people, it's just not in their DNA to do that. They send an email and they don't want to, offend someone, or they just don't have that drive. But she's got the shoe leather drive, and she's just applying it in different ways, in a very entrepreneurial way. So thanks for that, Natalie. Well, our next speaker is Richard Booz, who's been an independent writer for more than 25 years. He's got his full bio is on our website, but because it's very extensive. But his current clients include a large regional accounting firm and 2 engineering consulting firms. He's written hundreds of software reviews for 2 financial services trade publications. And he's also one of the organizers for the DFW Freelance Alliance, which I didn't even know existed, and we definitely want to hear much more about this DFW Freelance Alliance. So without further ado, Richard Booz. And do you want me to pull up a particular page? Or?
Well, I think we're fine the way it is.
Okay.
First off, I want to say I have a tremendous amount of admiration for Natalie. As you hear my story, you will find that I was nowhere near as well directed or as successful when I was in my 20s. Quite frankly, I spent a good portion of that decade trying to figure out exactly what I wanted to be doing. I graduated from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee in 1982. At the time, the country in general and the Milwaukee area in particular were going through a very bad recession, and I was unsuccessful in my efforts to find any kind of an entry-level job in either public relations or journalism. And after about 2 years of drifting from one odd job to another, I realized that if I wanted to really make a living being a writer, I somehow had to make that happen, even if no one was about to give me a job. So I began doing quite a bit of volunteer work with a number of small local charities and nonprofit organizations. I went in with the idea that all I was really looking for were more writing samples to add to my portfolio. And what I got really was far more valuable than that, in that these organizations were so small, and I was the closest thing they had to an expert, that they were willing to let me take on whatever I thought I was big enough to handle. And that gave me the confidence to begin entertaining the idea of going out on my own. And some of that volunteer work also led to some small, low-paying freelance jobs. And right about that same time, too, I approached Milwaukee Sentinel, that was the big daily morning newspaper in Milwaukee, about doing some freelance feature writing for them. So I had that going, and I had some of these smaller freelance gigs that were in marketing, communications, and PR areas going. And eventually I kind of reached a fork in the road where I realized there would be some ethical conflicts if I tried keeping both the journalism and the PR and marketing activities going at the same time. So I pretty much left the journalism world in the late 1980s. And quite frankly, for a while I would do just about anything legal. Some of my work was in the PR area, some was in event planning. For some of the projects I took on, I also did the graphic design and photography. And eventually I realized that while I was a jack of all trades, what I really enjoyed the most was the writing, and that was what I was the best at, and I settled upon that. The clientele that I had in the Milwaukee area, a lot of it was in the manufacturing area. For a while I partnered with a sales consultant who would help smaller manufacturers set up national sales networks. And what he needed to complement that was someone who could write a variety of collateral material, articles that could be published in trade publications, and things like that. And that consumed much of my time during the 1990s. And during that time, I also developed a long-distance relationship with someone who lived in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, who had 4 children from a previous marriage. And eventually, we recognized that to keep the relationship going, one of us was going to need to relocate. And it was easier for one person, me, to relocate than it was for her and her 4 children to relocate. So we got married, and I relocated to the DFW area at the end of 2001. The initial work that came my way when I got down here happened to be in the accounting and technology areas. And quite frankly, I knew very little about either one of them at the time. But thankfully, the initial clients I had were willing to bear with me through my learning curve. And eventually, I began to pick up more work of that nature on my own. I got labeled as being an expert, whether or not I really merited that or not. And some of the work I picked up included writing software reviews for 2 trade publications. One was called CPA Magazine, and that went out to smaller CPA firms. The other one was called Collection Advisor, and if you were to read the magazine, the introductory info, it would say that they deal with the accounts receivables management area or practice. And what that largely means is collection agencies. So I got to learn quite a bit about the kind of software that collection agencies use and how their businesses operate. And some changes came up there, and I basically let those 2 clients more or less fade away. I would say about 3 years ago. By the time that happened, I had picked up 3 other regular clients that Jake mentioned. One is a large regional accounting firm. One is a safety engineering consultant who does a lot of work as an expert witness. And the other is a larger engineering consulting firm that does a lot of work abroad. And what they specialize in is when there is some kind of an equipment failure, usually a big ticket equipment failure like hospital MRI machines or what have you, they will go in and figure out why it happened and whether or not it can be repaired or if it needs to be replaced. So that is pretty much the area where I work in. And I think when it comes to pricing, one advantage that a writer has is that you can use the word count, which is very tangible to both a writer and a client, as a basis for determining the fee. Now I know that fees probably vary quite a bit. As a rule, I will give a client the option of either paying me 80 cents per word or $80 per hour. And usually most of them will take the 80 cents per word because at the get-go they have a very good idea of what the final cost is going to be. If they want a 500-word article written, they know that at 80 cents a word, their final cost is going to be $400. Now, it's useful to have something that you can peg your prices on. And Natalie made a very interesting point too, where she talked about outsourcing, because one factor you will run into is that you have to really think about how many billable hours you can fit into a week, and that helps you determine what you need to charge and what sort of income you need to have coming in both by the month and the year to have the kind of life you want to enjoy. Usually, as a rule, I would say you could probably figure you will be very busy if you have 20 billable hours per week. Now, if you're able to outsource different activities, you may be able to build up from there. I would say, again, be realistic in determining just how much work you can churn out every week, every month, and be open to opportunities where you may be able to outsource some of the things that need to be done. It could be bookkeeping, it could be taking care of different errands or things of that nature. And that pretty much summarizes what I do. As I mentioned, I started out in journalism, and now I'm pretty much in the entire marketing, communications area, so that really is my area of expertise right now.
Richard, I called up the Freelance Alliance webpage here. Can you tell us a little bit about the DFW Freelance Alliance?
DFW Freelance Alliance is a very loosely knit local organization. It has no membership dues, and no real membership requirements. The group has brown bag luncheons that are held at the North Dallas Chamber of Commerce every other month. If you are a member of the local IABC, PRSA, or AWC, Association for Women in Communications chapters, those luncheons are free. If you're not, there is a $10 fee. Usually there are speakers there that address issues that are relevant to independence. We had one recently who talked about financial planning for self-employed individuals. We had our most recent speaker, would have been a week ago, and she talked with dealing with toxic clients and toxic workplaces, and that was rather interesting. And in the months when there are no brown bag workshops, there are happy hours. Those are usually held at Trinity Hall in the Mockingbird Station Shopping Center. And there are no fees to that, but you're on your own for buying any beverages or food. And the group also maintains a Facebook page, DFW Freelance Alliance, as well as a LinkedIn group with a little over 520 members. And that again is DFW Freelance Alliance. It's a great organization for being able to meet and talk, shop with individuals who are in the same kind of situations that all of us are in.
Terrific. Thank you, Richard. All right. There's some questions popping up on Twitter that we'll get to here in a minute too, but let's our next panelist, we'd like to introduce Donnie Claxton, owner of Claxton Creative, which is, he's the founder of a website focused on the science of archaeoastronomy, featuring more than 250 of the ancient, medieval, and modern wonders of the world. He's also the former DISD communications coordinator, director, so he may look familiar to you from those evening newscast interviews. But Donnie has, what's interesting about what he's doing now is there's so many niches that you can explore with digital technology and emerging niches that you can explore. And Donnie is going to tell you about a niche that he's diving into, and he's actually going to demonstrate it for you with respect to ebooks. So is it plugged in, Donnie? So let's do the switch here.
No signal. All right.
Oh, there we go. We got it.
Okay, so who am I? He kind of touched on that. I used to be
Ooh, you just lost
the person you saw on TV every night explaining why teachers take kids' desks and do all kinds of fun things. And I don't get to do those fun things anymore. I did a little bit of PR for ExxonMobil and SunWest Communications, and then finally decided it's really kind of time to do something on my own. And I think it's that I'm not.
I'll hold it. I'll hold it for you.
Well, that's going to get awkward, isn't it? So, who am I? I go through that, and I'm going through and I'm demonstrating a book that I made for the iPad, and it's actually my presentation is on the iPad. And if any of you have an iPad here with you today, I'm happy to plug mine into it. And if you have ISO 5.1 at least, or iBooks 2 on your iPad, it'll load right on, and you can get this, or you can download it off of claxtoncreative.com afterwards. But I've done a little bit of everything over the past couple of years, trying to find out what I wanted to be when I finally grow up, if I ever do. And so I started doing a bunch of blogging, started continuing trying to do some PR, and then got sick last year and started, or actually in 2011, sitting around, and one day I was sitting there and asked a question I know all of you have asked yourselves at one time or another, and that was, what the hell is Stonehenge doing up there all by itself? And so I started doing some research on the wonders of the world and started tracking their GPS locations. And as we did that, I started finding these patterns that happen with where these things are located around the world. There are bands where they just built pyramids, and they run across a continent, and they jump across the ocean, and they drop down a few degrees, and then they run across. And it goes all the way around the world. So that led us to this search for ways to help tell that story. And we wound up talking to a gentleman from ACU, and one of the things he told us about last January was Mr. Gore's wonderful book for iPad here, and it's going to take a second to pull it up. But in Al's book, as you can see in Al's book, you can actually see where we are. The iPad knows where we are and is pulling it up in the book, within the book. And as it's circulating the Earth there, that's where we are. That's pretty cool. You know, how many books have you ever seen the map pops up and initially it knows where you are and it's telling you and it's giving you actually satellite imagery of the world. But come on now. So you get into the book, and they have these chapters, and the chapter heads each have a photograph, and then the pages are down on the bottom here. And get into this chapter on the wind, and this just really just lit my fuse when I saw it, because, if you will, it turned the light bulb on, and come on Al. Well, who needs Al Gore, right? So let's just show you what we've been doing. Come on. Okay, so we started making digital books for the iPad. And we worked on a book last year, and we called the news media here in town. We called news media when our author was in town, in different towns across the country. And I heard a collective yawn. A book for iPad. Whoop-de-doo, who gives a damn? I mean, it's a book. Well, it's not a book. A book now starts with movies, and a book now has 3D animations. And so you can build into your book these incredible images. And with the book, you can actually pinch and enlarge the imagery and look at it. You can interact with it. This is a mask they found in Central America from about 700 AD. And we've been able to take it, transfer it into an image for the iPad, and into a 3D image that you can sit there, and most people, when they get this, sit there and twirl it all day. In Dr. Mark Van Stone's book, 2012 Science and Prophecy of the Ancient Maya, which is one of only about 4 books actually written by a scholar, there were thousands of materials produced last year, or in the past couple of years, about whether we were all going to die on December 21st. Only a few of them were actually written by learned scholars. This book is one of them, and this is the only book that was ever produced on the subject that has as much material like this. Now, this map in the book was in 4 different panels and took 2 pages to show in full color. And you know about printing, a publisher is looking at how much is my ink going to cost, how many pages are we talking about. So with this map in the book, real print book, took 4 images. On the iPad, we've been able to turn it into 19 images and tell a much more complete story. And as you want to go through, we're at 1500 BC, you can trace the civilization paths through Mesoamerica for the past 3,500 years, and the patterns just by simply scrolling across the screen. The next one we worked on was a children's book, and some of you may recognize this voice.
Words by Ken Plume and John Robinson. Art by Len Peralta. As read by Peter Serafinovich.
Anybody got a clue who Peter Serafinovich might be? Going once, going twice?
Familiar, right?
It does.
The strong.
So it's Lord Darth Maul is actually doing the audio reading of this children's storybook that we've been able to produce. Remember those little square puzzles, of plastic puzzles with the pieces you had to move around when you were a kid? Well, heck, all you have to do now is just do that on the iPad. We can put your cover, we can put any image you want into your book, and you have magic. This is the way kids are learning today. And this is what we're doing. And so I thought, well, what better way to help you guys understand by letting you have some of these materials, but we make these books, and we've been doing this since Apple put out the software last January. And it took about 8 months to figure out how to really do this, because I've had to learn how to do video, audio, graphics, Photoshop, Audition, all of the Adobe suite. I've had to learn in the past year or so. I know what I'm talking about when I ask other people what they're doing with it, or to make things, the magic happen. So far, right now, we're talking to education groups, business groups, news people, religious authors, preachers, ministers, children's authors, and then there's the whole textbook industry, and we're even talking about how to take the e-learning content for e-learning platforms, Moodles, and those kinds of things. All that content has to be digitized. And there is just this amazing demand for it. And I talked to one of our colleagues about this, and I told him, we're in the middle of a gold rush. And he says, no, you are in the middle of a gold landslide. I mean, there is so much material that people want to be putting onto their iPads, and not just iPads, but Kindles and Nooks, and all of that. And it is just blowing up. So, you know, I've had to find this, and I found this niche by mistake. I had to bump in, had to do all these things, and find my way. So there's some materials I wanted to tell you about. Some great tools out there for this workshop. Carol Roth, you can find her book in any Barnes & Noble. It was me, I turned. Carol Roth has a great book, and she's asking some questions. So there's a girl in her book, lady in her book named Sarah, who likes to bake cakes. Well, that's great. So Sarah needs to make some decisions about whether she wants to be in freelance or she wants to be in business for herself. Or does she want to just go work somewhere where she can make cakes all day and be happy making cakes? And that's what we have to do as freelancers and new and small startup business people, is decide, are we going to be happy making cakes, or are we going to be happy making cakes, filing taxes, keeping track, chasing clients, getting them to pay us, doing all of the other things, getting our advertising, getting our PR, getting our marketing, getting our social media, getting all of those things worked out, and by the way, do you know how to do all the stuff in the Adobe Suite? So, which is going to make you happier? Is it going to be making happier making cakes, or figuring out how to make all those cakes that have to be put together to make the big cake? That's what Carol Roth's book will tell you about. There's another great book out there called Value-Based Fees by Alan Weiss. In that book, he really starts talking about how do you determine what you're going to charge somebody. And the most important thing I got out of reading his materials is, once you figure out what you're going to charge somebody, you need to go stand in the mirror like this guy right here, and you need to get so straight-faced and practiced. I am going to charge you $2,000, $5,000, $10,000 to do X, Y, and Z. And you need to have that down like nobody's business, with no inflections in your voice, no worry about it, just pure, straight-out confidence. Because if a client can sense that you're not sure, that, well, they are going to start to mess with you about how much they're going to pay you, when they're going to pay you, and on and on and on. Natalie brought up the 4-Hour Work Week. It is a great book, and as I point out right here in this bottom paragraph, I've never met Timothy Ferriss, and he talks a great inspirational story in his book, but every time I have met somebody who has actually met Timothy Ferriss, they say that man is running to the next plane, to get on a plane to go somewhere. He is not living the life that he is talking about in this 4-hour work week. So, in and of itself, that is a big myth. But he does have some good points in there. There are some ways to find people on the other side of the planet who are awake when you're sleeping, who you can farm out little projects to and get them to do some helpful things. There are some great tools, great points in there, and it's a great philosophy to work toward. But don't read this book and think by this time next year you're going to be sitting on a beach somewhere like he is in that picture. It's not going to happen unless something just amazing, really amazing happens. Another great book to read is The Dragonfly Effect. It goes through and teaches you some processes on how to run your business and think about doing your business. Another great tool out there is the New Rules in Marketing of PR, dividing up your potential customers into personas, getting to know that persona, getting to know who that person is, why you want to do business with them, and then being able to go to them and pitch them on what it is that they need. So, things to think about if you're getting going in this. How are you going to pay for getting started? If you're going to be in the computer and writing business, you know, I know a couple of, I've talked about, had worked at news businesses, and they had an iPad and they had a nice computer when they were at the paper, and now you've started up Smith Inc. or Acme Inc. and it's time for you to go to the computer, the IT department, and get your new computer, and you have the hard reality that, one, you are the IT department, and you are the finance department, and you are the acquisitions department. And if you don't have the money, and if you don't have the computer, you're not going to pick out your new iPad or your new iMac or your new iPhone. You're going to have to figure out how to pay for that yourself, how to hook up the internet, how to get that installed, how to find an office, how to find office furniture. I mean, it is a lot of stuff to think about. And so as I go through this, I want you to think about, do you like to make cakes, and do you want to find a business where you can make cake all day and be happy, or do you want to do all these things to make the big cake? Customers are a wonderful thing in the education business. There's a cliche that a bunch of teachers like to talk about. It would be great, this business would be great, teaching would be great to do if I didn't have to fool with all these damn students. In some ways, business would be great if you didn't have to fool with all these damn customers. They pay when they're ready to pay. Some of them, even if you do have a contract and they're supposed to pay, they will tell you they're going to pay, and then you have to call them, and you have to chase them, and you have to chase them, and you have to chase them, and then by that time, once you finally get paid, it's time to drop them and move on to somebody who will pay you when you said, or when they said they will. I have a process now where I won't do work without somebody paying me 1/2 up front, a quarter when I deliver them a comp, and then the final quarter before I put an ISB in or remove a watermark in that product. It's just that simple. I have dealt with clients now who have promised me shares and stock and ownership in companies. The hell with that. Don't do it. You're wasting your time. I actually had a heart attack at 45 years old dealing with a client over when was I going to get paid. You know, and then I get back to work and his first comment was, I didn't cause this heart attack. Like, hell you did.
Okay. But will this be available on...
It's already up on claxtoncreative.com.
Okay.
And so there's, and I know Liz is going to talk about forms and filings and other things that you have to do. So pull it down, and if you want, I can give you a copy of it, but this will only work on the iPad. There are versions that we can do coming where you can get it on Kindle and Nook, but that's it. Thank you.
Terrific. Thanks, John. A little technical pizzazz, huh? So what I'm going to do now is pull up some links that Liz Zavala, our board member here, provided for us. And Liz, can you show us what these links are and how they can be helpful? They are, by the way, under the short link, j.mp/ultimate links. And that's where I've gathered them all. And which one do you want me to follow?
Just really quickly, I was laid off after 26 years in journalism and suddenly had to make a living while also fighting with the Texas Workforce Commission. A couple of things that I want to point out here is that this is actually a story that I was going to do for the Southern Poverty Law Center about religion in schools and how it works. This to me is a really good example that when you get a contract, basically I was going to write 1,600 words and get paid $1,600 for that. This actually deals with a lot of the legal things that Tom was talking about earlier, and Donald, I think was his name. I'm sorry, I missed part of that, but to make a long story short here, in the middle of all of this process, I did this story. It took 4 months. I had submitted a first draft by the date, and somewhere between April 21st and May 21st, someone contracted with an outside agency to do a series on religion in public schools and what's permitted. So I ended up getting 33% of $1,600. And that was after spending about 4 months, because I believe I was assigned this in March, late February, early March. So on my checklist, which you can find on the PressClub website, and on
The same thing as
the links that Jake was talking about, it's really important to have a contract and a kill fee. I'm going to talk a little bit about the contract and also who you end up working with. Another story that I did, I had a chance to interview Patty Duke for a cover story for Bipolar magazine about her journey through bipolar disorder. And that actually went perfectly, followed deadlines. I had a chance to sit down for an hour with Patty Duke, which was fabulous, and write a really compelling story. And it's the first time I'd ever written a magazine piece, and I got the cover. I was very proud of that. It didn't pay as much as I would have liked. I got about, I think, 50 cents a word, but it was probably the best experience I ever had. After I got a job, after being laid off, I was laid off and I was out of work for 8 months. I got a full-time job, but I was still on a freelancing track just to kind of keep fresh because I'm now working for an online media company. I picked up a freelance assignment a couple of months ago, and it was very, very difficult to do with a 40-hour work week. And I found myself doing this because they were former colleagues and friends. And I violated a very crucial part of what we've heard today, which is you must have a contract and you must specify exactly when you're going to be paid and how much you're going to be paid. I went in with the thought that I was going to do this 2-part fantastic story, and if I would have priced it as I will talk about in a few minutes, you start high, $2 a word. Maybe you can end somewhere in the middle, $1 a word, or even 50 cents a word. I priced really well, but ended up realizing that this freelance assignment was taking more time than my 40-hour-a-week job, and I had to cut bait, but because I didn't have a contract, I left $900 on the table. And that was probably the most painful thing that I think I've done in a while. And plus, I ended up disappointing, some personal friends and former colleagues as well. But when you're talking about your time and the work that you do, that becomes very important. And if freelancing is all you do, this is business, folks. You're friends and you love each other, whatever. You still need to have a contract, and you need to specify, if I do this amount of work, I need to get at least this much if I can't finish the job, or if they end up contracting with somebody else to do a series that they end up being a lot cheaper than what you were going to be. How about the invoice?
Try calling that up.
This is just a generic invoice that
There we go.
I want to talk about a little bit. I spent 3 months doing a research job for ESPN.com, and it was a lot of data collection and a lot of sending out information requests and psycho calling and emailing people on the phone trying to get information, because we all have a deadline. But when you contract with a big company like ESPN, which is part of ABC, they will give you a vendor number, and they will actually psycho email you and make sure that you have filled out all of your forms. In this case, I had to fill out 8 or 9 pages of information just to get a vendor number from them. And they also included a W-9, which is really important because that gets you a W-2 from your company that you did. But this can be very simple. The one thing that this contract does not have is it doesn't have, what you can add is if they are 30, 60, and 90 days late. And what you can do with that is you can do kind of like what anybody's health plan does. If you don't pay your payment, within 30 days, they add 10% onto, your final bill. I did not have to do any cycle calling or emailing with these folks. They basically were like, "Are you done?" I said, "Yes." Send us an invoice. I did, and I received payment. I finished this job on December 30th of 2010, and they actually direct deposited $1,950 in my account by January 10th, which I thought was really fantastic. There are other people that will actually say the words that we've all heard, and some of us have maybe said that the check is in the mail. Yeah. And back to that freelance job that I had to get a kill fee for, I was assigned in March. The story was killed right after the second draft was submitted in May, and I did not get paid for that assignment until August. So you just kind of have to really be careful and watch after yourself, because if you were, as I was in that case, dealing with the Texas Workforce Commission and unemployment, which is an entirely different seminar, when you do freelancing and you've been laid off and you're getting unemployment, getting that money is really important, because basically if you do a freelance job and you're getting unemployment, unemployment's not going to want to pay you because technically you've worked even though you haven't gotten paid. So we could probably open it up for questions now, but
we technically have about 5 minutes left. I think certainly if people have somewhere they need to go, you're excused. You don't need a hall pass or anything. But hope maybe the questions will go a little bit longer than the 5 minutes we have remaining. But let's ask our speakers. First of all, let's give them a big round of applause. Practical information, and if could all of you come up here and let's just field what questions we have about making the money work. A real diversity of different perspectives here, but it all boils down to getting paid, right? So.
I'd like to start us off with questions about taxes and things like that to each panelist. How do you make sure that the IRS is happy?
Hire a good accountant.
Okay, hire a good accountant.
One of the things you run into, no matter what kind of entity you establish, is you have to pay estimated taxes 4 times a year. Now, after you're in it for a while, you'll figure out a percentage that works for you. What I do is, anytime I receive a payment, I automatically transfer 15% into a separate bank account for paying taxes. And then when the 15th of the month comes up in April, June, September, or January, I send the IRS what they are due, and that's pretty much it. I file jointly with my wife, and the self-employment income for me goes into our joint tax filing.
Same, hire an accountant. I don't want to deal with that stuff.
But transferring the money as soon as you get it is really important, because otherwise you spend it.
Right, otherwise, I do that the same day the payment comes in, because otherwise, hey, I can find all kinds of things to buy.
I had the same I had actually a different experience. The timing of, I got laid off twice in 1 year, so the timing of my layoffs were such that I've always claimed 0, so they take a ton of taxes out of my checks when I'm employed. But because I had a lot of money taken out of my taxes, I didn't get back as much money as I normally would at tax time, but I definitely saw the hit because I did not, pay taxes. And one of the things that my accountant told me, and I actually was able to do this all on TurboTax, but I did call someone, a friend, and she had recommended as an accountant 15%. If you can do more, that would be good. And when I ended up getting a job again, I claimed 0, but also had an extra $100 a month taken out just specifically for taxes to make sure that I was going to be okay with the IRS, because it's my, and you guys can probably speak to this, once you file quarterly, they're going to look for you every quarter to make sure that you file. And that was just a headache that I didn't want to have, so.
Right, what they typically do, if you've been in it for a year, is come January, you get a nice thick letter from the IRS that includes little coupons and envelopes for sending in your quarterly tax statements. And one thing that goes with that is there are a lot of expenses you can deduct, mileage, meals or meetings at Starbucks that are business related, but you have to keep track of all of them.
We had a Twitter question from Candace, one of our alums. You want to verbalize it in person?
Yeah, you know what I look like.
There we go.
I just want to know, at what point you just cut your losses on clients that they're ignoring invoices, they're ignoring phone calls, you know, they're just being the bad client. And when you do cut your losses, does that become a donation of your time?
What was the last part?
If you do have to cut your losses, does that become like a tax donation on your tax form?
At what point do you cut your losses, and if you do, does it become a tax donation?
No.
It can be if you prove that you made the effort to collect on it. Thankfully, for myself, there were a few times where I got burned when I was starting out, where it was only like a few $100s, and I just said, oh well, and moved on.
Sometimes taking the donation's not worth it, because that hits the IRS to start looking at your income tax.
What other questions you guys have?
I had one, but, I was gonna say, since, there's such a wide range of experience on the panel, if you had to say per client, per hour, what you charge, what would you average it about? Just based on where you are now in your career. I know that's a question for everyone.
Since I'm a print journalist, I was a print journalist for so many years, I went by the word or by the inch. And my philosophy was it's just kind of like negotiating a job. Start at the upper end. There are some magazines out there that will pay $2 a word. And then there are some that pay $1 a word, and then there are some that pay 50 cents a word. What I did with the freelance job that I had to cut bait on was I priced them at $2 a word, and because I knew them, I halved the total. So, but I always start at the high end.
I usually, if a client will ask for an hourly rate, I will tell them $80 per hour, and where that will often come into play is if they have something and someone wrote where they know it needs a great deal of improvement, then usually the hourly rate will come in. Most of the clients that I have, they'll tend to be more comfortable with word, paying by the word. And usually I go for 80 cents a word as usually my standard fee. There may be situations where you may take on a lower paying client. It could be like for a nonprofit or charity that you really believe in. It could be for a small startup business that you really like. Or it could just be that you don't have anything on your plate at the moment.
So your question is, how much do we charge? Is that
About an average hourly rate.
I guess my average would be anywhere from $25 to $50. It really depends though, because
Yeah, that's why I was like, I know, especially for you, like you said, it's different platforms
Yeah.
take different time investment.
yeah, right. It really varies for me.
And we don't necessarily do an hourly rate. We can do page per page, or we can build it out per project. For doing some of the things like the 3D stuff, that's going to cost you a lot more. It's just going to depend. My website, claxoncreative.com, does have, if you scroll down, there is a menu sheet of different charges we do for different things.
And I saw for some things it's consultation and some things.
Yeah,
it's like that.
because if a huge, like we're talking to a couple of teaching organizations right now, and they're going to want us to transfer their content for the next 5 years, that's going to be a different rate than, you know, a $2,000 per project. And, you know, it's going to either go up or down depending on how much work's going to be involved and how much time. It's just, you know, I was very careful to try to couch every price that's on that menu, so that that's probably going to start here and then we're going up.
And then I'm sorry, I had an independent question for Natalie. You focus mostly on digital, but at this point, are you thinking about how all of the social media platforms are building into the larger public relations strategy, or do you say that's not what I'm focusing on, I'm strictly digital?
What do you mean into the larger?
I mean, social media is part of a larger integrated marketing and communication strategy. Do you help your clients with that, or do you say this is what I focus on mainly?
I am all digital, and I plan to stick with just digital social media. But it's constantly changing, and so there's just a whole lot involved. Some of my clients treat me as a marketing and advertising professional, which I'm certainly not, but I do have some insight. So I do take some traditional PR, and it's kind of a synergy, if you will, of all of the above. So, but I will stick with digital.
And the great thing about being small, and what I did talk about, but I didn't talk about in the book, but didn't talk about here, is the ability to pivot, which is just a great business practice for being a small business. I mean, when I worked with ExxonMobil, I would take them a project, and it would be 6 months before they could make a decision on whether they even want to talk about it. By then, and coming from a news background, going into corporate PR it just drove me absolutely bonkers, because, you know, we're ready, we've got a news release or we've got something written by the end of the hour. They're talking about doing it by the end of the next quarter.
Yeah.
It's just a whole different way of thinking. So
Maybe one last question here.
My question specifically, I think, for Richard and or Liz, more Richard. If you start negotiating with client A versus client B, do you ever get repercussions from he charged me this versus he charged me that for different rates for maybe similar jobs?
Usually what I try to avoid is having two clients where there would be a conflict of interest, like two accounting firms that compete in the same geographical area or something like that. And where that can come into play is if you get work through like a staffing firm or a PR or ad agency, you can generally figure you'll get half or less than half of what you would get if you went out and got to work on your own. And I think you need to avoid conflicts there. I think it comes down to more or less whether or not the two clients are competitors rather than the rate.
I handle each person differently, and depending upon who they are, if it's a specialty publication that I consider myself to be an expert with, and I know that they have the money, I'm going to go for $2 a word or $1 a word. But if it's going to be for a newspaper, and I used to handle freelancers when I was at the Dallas Morning News, I kind of know how they pay. So if it's going to be for a neighborhood section, I would have a certain fee that I would charge, that I would ask for, and see where they would meet me. If it's going to be for the metro section, I know what they would pay. If it's going to be for the cover, I know what they would pay, so I would just kind of stick to my guns on that. And if it's going to be a page one piece, then I'm gonna go like I alluded to before. I took what my total price would be if it was for a magazine, and then I have to. But I would not share information like that with anybody else.
Well, one of the things we want to emphasize at a workshop for freelancers is the value of your time. And so we're about 10 minutes over now at this point, but we've had just three incredible panels today. Let's thank our final panel. Liz is a board member, so but our guest speakers get Starbucks cards, and And just want to thank you guys so much for coming out. We really enjoy hosting these workshops, co-hosting them with the Press Club of Dallas. Hopefully each of you who came in, some of you are students, obviously a bunch of different backgrounds, but hopefully everyone is taking away some valuable advice. And we'll see you at the next Press Club networking event. And feel free to approach the speakers if you have any questions. But thanks for another terrific event. So.